2 months ago, when this season of Starfleet Academy first started, I reviewed the first 2 episodes, tentatively concluding that I quite enjoyed them and was looking forward to the rest. And I was inundated with negative comments accusing me of being a paid shill for Paramount. For the record, I have never received any money from any of my videos. If I was being paid, I would be a hell of a lot more positive. With that said, the season is over now, so here's my thoughts on the remaining episodes. Episode 3, Vitus Reflux, is probably my least favourite episode of the run. It's one of the more juvenile stories, centred around a prank war between Starfleet Academy and their rivals, the War College. This whole setup didn't really work for me. They're meant to be a scary group of jocks, but they're really just a gang of stupid kids, and never feel like much of a threat. At the same time, we also get a rivalry between Darum and Genesis, each competing to lead the Calico team, which would be fair enough if this was a show about high schoolers, but these are meant to be college-age students, so you'd think they were a bit beyond this. Episode 4, Vox in Excelsior, is a solid Klingon episode, with Jaden's personal storyline combining with the wider story of the Klingons needing a new homeworld, which feels exactly like the sort of story that this show should be telling. Jaden's backstory gives some insight into growing up as a non-warrior Klingon, which I don't think we've ever seen before. And the ending is a neat solution to the dilemma, and it feels like the sort of thing that Picard might have come up with. Gina Yashui also gets a good scene here as Lura, before she just disappears for the rest of the series. It's a shame really, as she was a very promising character. Episode 5, Series Acclamation Mill, is catnip for Deep Space Nine fans like myself, with Sam investigating the mystery of Sisko's disappearance. It's great to see that whole era being referenced, for those of us who watched it play out week by week 30 years ago, and the appearances of Kira Clofton as Jake and Tawny Newsom as the new Dax were wonderful to see. They did leave Sisko's fate open-ended, even though he has returned in some of the books and comics, but that was probably the right decision, as none of the attempts to follow up on the ending have really stuck. It's also the most stylistically experimental episode, with Sam talking to the camera and pausing the action to doodle on things, which does make sense in context, but it might put off the older viewers who are more likely to be fans of Deep Space Nine. Come Let's Away is the big action episode, with the cadets captured by a gang of bloodthirsty pirates during a training exercise. It's one of the few episodes where there's real tension, there's a real life and death situation, and one character does die, although it's just one of the War College gang who I didn't really care about. It would have been much more impactful if Tarima had not recovered. Again, this does a good job of balancing the cadet storyline with events in the larger Federation. Paul Giamatti returns as New Spracker, and he has some excellent face-to-face scenes with Holly Hunter. He's a truly magnificent villain and seems to relish the chance to let loose. Cozine is a small-scale character-based episode. Not much happens. Caleb and Genesis sneak around the empty sets during the holidays. At first I thought they were trying to create some sort of love triangle, but thankfully they stayed away from that. And it does give more of an insight into Genesis' characters than the other episodes do, so that's a good thing at least. Also, we have Jaden gate-crashing Darren's wedding. It's a rather predictable storyline, where Darren's torn between loyalty to his family and duty to Starfleet. It feels like we've seen it countless times before, and this is really nothing new. The Life of the Stars has everyone still dealing with the trauma from 2 episodes earlier, which makes you wonder how they'll cope when they're on a starship, with red shirts dying every week. Tilly from Discovery returns. She was an ensign herself just a few years ago, but now she's a seasoned teacher who brings the cadets back together by having them put on a play, which somehow works. But the best part of the episode is Sam's storyline. She goes back to her home world and has her entire life reset, so she gets to live out an entire childhood with the Doctor as her father. This changes both characters irrevocably, so it's a shame it happens off screen. I would have liked to see a montage of him raising her at least. It feels like they could have done it earlier in the episode and then shown the consequences for the rest of it. In 300th Night we meet the new Sam, who's still quirky but less naive and more confident, and the new Doctor, who has now become a loving father. The main plot resolves Caleb's search for his mother, which was his main purpose in the first 2 episodes, but has barely been mentioned since. He finally tracks her down to the planet Ukek, which is a bit like Coruscant from Star Wars, all neon signs and dark alleyways, and he immediately finds her after looking around for about 30 seconds, which is very handy. She still hates the Federation, so Caleb is forced to tune between her and his friends. It feels like they're setting up a reveal of her being one of the bad guys, but thankfully that never comes. Meanwhile, the Venari Ral have been developing weapons of mass destruction using the Omega particles, which were apparently mentioned in an episode of Voyager, but I can't say I remember it. Now they've been made into bombs, which encircle the entire Federation. How this works in three-dimensional space is unclear, as is how they managed to pull it off, when, as far as I knew, they were just a small group of criminals. But despite this slightly contrived setup, Rubicon does end the season on a high. It's all been built into the cadets having to save the entire Federation, and it seems reasonably plausible how they do it, with all of them working together to fix the ship and figuring out how to stop the bombs. Tig Notaro steps up as Jet Reno, the only adult left on board, and she proves to be a fine commander. They should give her own spin-off next. And my great-granddaughter Genesis Lythe also gets to step up as captain. Proud of you, kid. Paul Giamatti as Newspracker is at his most loathsome here, taking over the beautiful atrium set and defacing it with graffiti and small fires everywhere. The mock trial broadcast on the Venari Ral's evil news channel feels a bit too contemporary. You would hope such things won't exist in 1,000 years. It does allow for some excellent performances from Holly Hunter again, and Tatiana Maslany in particular, who is just superb, venting an entire lifetime of rage and grief. If there was any justice, she'd get all kinds of awards. Refreshingly, the galaxy is saved, not through use of force, but through science and diplomacy, which feels very true to the spirit of Star Trek. It is very satisfying to see Newspracker get the justice he deserves, when in real life such people just rise to the top and stay there. It's been a very variable season overall, swinging between highs and lows from one week to the next. Old school fans had plenty to enjoy with all of the callbacks to Deep Space Nine and Voyager, although the 32nd century still feels a bit underdeveloped, and factions like the Venari Ral could have used a lot more fleshing out. On the school front, there wasn't as much of a focus on teen romance as I'd feared. There's only really Caleb and Tarima's relationship to cater for rom-com fans. Plus there was Jaden and Kyle, whose relationship was much more in the background. Maybe they thought it would be too controversial to have a gay clone character front and centre. The rest of the gang mostly had storylines focused on their friendships or academic pursuits, so by the end of the season they do feel a lot more developed than some Star Trek crews get. You know more about them than most of the cast of Discovery, for example. The second season has already been filmed, so presumably it will be out next year. If it continues to build on the strengths of this one, then it could be worth looking forward to. I found myself enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would, although I know I'm really not the target audience. But I'd say it's more likely to get young people into Star Trek than the likes of Discovery or Picard or even Strange New Worlds. In theory, at least. In practice, who knows? Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see my thoughts on future Star Trek projects. There's still 2 more seasons of Strange New Worlds on the way, as well as Academy. And hopefully the franchise will continue after that, whether in TV shows or movies or whatever. So that's all from me. See you next time.